Welcome to Primetime News. It's Thursday, April 17th here in Seoul, and I'm Choi Yu-sun.
I'm Sean Lim. Thank you so much for joining us. A major rescue operation continues on this Thursday evening in efforts to save hundreds of people, mostly high school students, who are believed to be trapped inside a capsized ferry off Korea's southwestern coast.
While underwater rescue operations have been halted, it seems officials are still working on the scene as new updates continue to come in this evening. In the last hour, 5 tallies have been added to the death toll. 14 people have been confirmed dead, bringing down the number of missing to 282. It's been over a day and a half since this tragic incident began, forever changing the lives of the 475 people who were on board the Sewol ferry, many of them high school students heading to Korea's southern Jeju Island for a field trip. According to the securities minister earlier today, 179 people have been rescued. 101 of them are being treated in 8 different hospitals, with 5 of them said to be in critical condition. And let's now go live to our Yuri-an. She joins us from the Paengmok Harbor in Jindo County, where search and rescue operations are underway.
So, Leon, the harsh weather earlier this afternoon halted search and rescue efforts. How are operations going now?
Hi guys, well, rescue operations have actually resumed around 3 hours ago at 7 p.m. Korea time. That's when the tides were expected to be the calmest. But unfortunately, I do not have any updates on new victims being found from the waters off the Paengmok harbor down here. The weather, like you mentioned, has been extremely bad down here. Prior to 7 p.m., all rescue operations have been halted starting from 2 p.m. There have been strong winds, high tides of as up to 1.1 meters, and the waters were also murky. Now, the divers went into the waters a total of 12 times, but not once were they able to get into the vessel. They were trying to inject air into the vessel for potential survivors in there, but they were not able to get in there, at least not even once. The temperature of the seawater was as low as 10 degrees, and the murky waters only allowed them visibility of up to 10 centimeters. So unfortunately, the weather is truly just not helping the situation down here.
So moving forward, what can we expect to see from now on?
Well, rescue operations will continue throughout the night, but it won't be a rigorous one, unfortunately. There's not much rain right now, but rain is in the forecast, at least until tomorrow morning. That means aircrafts cannot be flown out to the site of the accident. And also, there are vessels afloat right now, the rescue vessels, but they will primarily be used just to search for bodies that rise up to the water or any surviving victims. No divers will be able to go into the water, given that the tides is expected to go up to as high as 4 meters tonight. Now, a lot of the hope is on the cranes that are expected to arrive tomorrow, 1 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. Those 3 cranes will be used to haul up the vessel and move it to a safer location for a smoother process for the rescue operation. But to be honest, the vessel is 6,400 tons, and there's a lot of seawater in there. So experts are saying it could take as long as days to really get the vessel to a safer location. Now, it's just truly heartbreaking to imagine that there are still 286 victims out there in the darkness, in those dark waters. And it's really frustrating for me to be down here to see that the weather conditions are just not helping. Guys?
All right, Leanne, do keep us updated in our next newscast. That was our Yuri-an reporting live from Paengmok Harbor in Jindo County off the coast where the Sewol ferry capsized.
Let's now go live to our Kwon So-a, who is at the Jindo Indoor Auditorium down in the coastal city. So it's been over 37 hours since the vessel began to capsize.
And there's a sense of every precious minute passing without any hopeful results from the rescue mission. How are the families of those who are missing holding up?
Well, the hundreds of families that are gathered here at the Jindo Indoor Auditorium really don't have any other focus than waiting for any bits of new information and watching a television screen showing the updates on rescue operations. Now, the atmosphere was relatively calm just a bit ago, but now that the number of confirmed deaths is rising, people are becoming more and more agitated. And from time to time, I hear people shouting at authorities here, and also I hear parents crying out for their children and hoping for their loved ones to return safely to them. Now, some people even fainted and are being treated by nurses, which are one of the around 500 volunteers helping out. Companies and civic groups like the Red Cross and welfare foundations are supplying families with relief supplies like food, raincoats, hot packs, and blankets. Guys.
Earlier in the day, President Park Geun-hye was on site to comfort the families and answer questions. Was she able to put more pressure on the search?
Yes, Sean. At around 4:20 p.m., President Park arrived at the auditorium to talk with the families and consult them. She vowed to help in any possible way and called for the utmost effort from the rescue crews. The families had many questions and mixed emotions filled the gym. Some were skeptical about the rescuers, saying whenever they went to the site, they did not see the hundreds of divers that were supposed to be there to help, and were furious that they seemed to be not receiving accurate information on the rescue process.
So we also heard a government has established a task force in Jindo.
Yes, that's right, Yusun. 11 related ministries have joined to create a crisis center here in Jindo, headed by Lee Ju-young, the Minister of the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries. The first meeting began around an hour ago, where the ministers checked on the current research and rescue process and discussed further actions. Meanwhile, some families are taking shuttle buses to Pengmo Harbor to watch the rescue efforts with their own eyes, and the buses are running every hour. And that's all I have for now, but I'll be back with more in our next newscast. Back to you guys.
All right, thank you, So-a. That was our Kwon So-a reporting live from Jindo Indoor Auditorium, where she's with the families of the missing passengers who are desperately waiting for hopeful news. And now we're joined by our Park Ji-won here in the studio to tell us more about some of the clues about how this accident actually happened.
Ji-won, the cause of the accident, tell us in detail.
Yes, it came about 5 hours ago that it's been confirmed by VMS, that's vessel monitoring system, that this vessel made an abrupt shift in its travel course at about 8:48, 4 minutes before the first report came in, and this could have caused it to list. And due to this, the 180 vehicles and 1,000 tons of cargo on board may have shifted to one side abruptly, so ultimately causing the ship to capsize very quickly. And this again is a preliminary finding, and it's important to repeat this as the investigation into what happened is ongoing. And there is still a possibility that the ship might have crashed into submerged reefs or rocks.
Well, we're still trying to figure out what caused the ship to sink, but there has been a lot of confirmation about what happened in the ship before it capsized that led to a lot more of these deaths and missing numbers. Observers say that appropriate measures were not taken.
Yes, Sean, unfortunately, human errors being blamed for worsening the situation. And we all heard reports that the passengers were told to remain where they were and when the ship first encountered trouble. This runs counter to what safety experts advise people to do in such situations. They should have headed for open air. And there are reports that the captain of the ferry, identified as 60-year-old Lee Jun-seok, was one of the first to jump into a lifeboat, reportedly the only available lifeboat at the time. He abandoned the sinking ship and hundreds of passengers. And experts say this is absolutely unacceptable, that the captain, who should have remained on board giving directions, abandoned ship, along with other crew who also bailed out early. The captain spoke to investigators this morning and said he was truly sorry for the passengers and the victims' families.
정말 죄송하고 면목이 없습니다. 뭐라고 말씀드릴 수 없습니다.
And new reports have been coming in saying that he wasn't even in the wheelhouse at the moment when the crisis began and when a loud bang was heard aboard the ship. And the captain didn't answer questions about whether he changed the ship's course or whether he used the only available lifeboat to rescue himself. And according to the nation's Ship Safety Act, the captain has a responsibility to remain on board in the event of trouble until all passengers are safely rescued. Coast Guard officials are currently investigating Lee on charges of manslaughter. And it's also been pointed out that the ferry was carrying 46 lifeboats, which is mandated by law. However, in released footage of rescued operations, only 1 or 2 rescued boats were spotted, meaning the other 40 plus were not even deployed. And some reports even say the boats were chained up to the ferry. And experts think this is all because of the lack of preparedness and training, which all boils down to human error.
Jiwon, many people are still clinging to hope based on a theory that there may be an air pocket formed inside the vessel that's helping people to stay alive. Tell us more about that.
Yes, experts point out that this vessel has not completely sunk into the water and the tip of the vessel is staying above the surface, meaning that a giant air pocket could be there where survivors could be using to breathe and stay alive. And local media reports have been pointing to a case out of Nigeria last year where a fisherman survived for 60 hours underwater by using such an air pocket until he was safely rescued. And let's listen to an expert.
Just like a cup was turned upside down in the water, air is locked inside the ship, especially in the front of the ship.
And the experts calculate some 500 to 1,000 cubic meters of oxygen could be inside the capsized ferry. However, 72 hours is the maximum hours that survivors can sustain in such conditions. But let's still hope that a miracle can happen for the nation.
Well, one miracle didn't happen the way that people hoped. Tell us about these text messages that were supposedly sent from trapped survivors this morning.
Yes, Sean, sadly, the messages were turned out to be false, according to the police investigation, and breaking the hearts of parents who believed that their beloved ones cut alive with their glimmering hopes. At around midnight last night, some 15 hours after the ship started listing, the alleged messages stated that they are inside the ship and still alive, which did raise hopes. But now all of this has turned out to be false. And police say no records of further messages were sent since noon yesterday when the ship was nearly fully submerged in the water.
All right, Jiwon, thank you for that report.
Well, we are still uncertain about what caused the ferry to sink and what's hindering search and rescue efforts, but there are some theories.
And to shed some light into the latest disaster, we now connect by phone to Kim Kwon-so, Professor of Maritime Transportation Systems at Mokpo National Maritime University. Professor, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, it seems the Coast Guard has tentatively concluded that the ship capsized after the captain suddenly veered the vessel. What could have prompted the captain to make such a risky move, especially when the currents in the area are known to be strong?
Surprisingly enough, it is reported that while the ship was navigating in Mango Channel, the captain was not in navigating bridge, and only third officer steered the ship. The exact reason is not known. Why third officer changed the steering course at large angle and turned the ship around suddenly. We can suspect that the ship might try to avoid colliding with something or an obstacle ahead at that time.
Well, Professor, some have suggested one of the causes for the sinking could be that the 20-year-old Sewol underwent one too many renovations, which led to it losing much of its dynamic stability. Can you tell us more about that?
The alterations and modification of passenger cabin area on board 20-year-old ship were said to be carried out, the capacity of a passenger ship was increased from 804 persons to 921 persons, and the gross tonnage was also increased from 5,686 tons to 6,825 tons 2 years ago. These alterations and the modifications seem to change the ship's main characteristics, especially in stability. This means that there is the possibility that these alterations and the modification had an influence of the certain risk of the ship to port side and capsize.
Well, drawing a lot of anger from observers is that the ship's crew is reported to have initially told passengers to stay put where they were. This was as the captain ordered the crew to evacuate themselves and jump off the boat. What should they have done according to what evacuation manuals and standards say?
That's true. I heard that the ship's crew are reported to have initially told the passengers to stay where they were at that time. I think captain made a mistake at the judgment for abandoning the ship. I think the captain had instructed the passengers to abandon the ship and evacuate as soon as possible at that time.
All right, Professor, thank you for sharing your insights with us tonight.
Thank you.
And as our Kwon So-a mentioned, amid the full-blown rescue efforts to desperately find any survivors from inside the sunken ferry, President Park Geun-hye paid a visit to the search site and the nearby gymnasium where many families are still hoping and waiting on news of their loved ones.
Our Paul Yi has more on the president's visit.
President Park Geun-hye arrived at the site of the search and rescue operation off the coast of Jindo on Thursday afternoon. The visit comes a day after the Sewol ferry sank 20 kilometers off Gyeongbuk Island. Upon her arrival at the nearby port, Korea's head of state inspected the area and was briefed on the ongoing rescue efforts carried out by the military and Coast Guard. She said she was very concerned that the rescue efforts were slow, even though so many personnel and equipment were being mobilized. Park told officials that every minute was critical and that the safety of the rescue workers was also a priority. Park later visited the indoor gymnasium where the families of those missing are gathered, taking questions and offering words of support.
가장 지금 힘들고 순간순간이 고통스럽고 애가 타고 미칠 것 같은 이분들한테 먼저 알려드려야 된다 이거죠. 모든 것을 자세하게 좀 알려드리시고 또 현장에서도 아주 모든 각오를 다 하고 그렇게 또 얘기를 했지만 또 원인 규명도 확실하게 할 거고 거기에 대해서 거기에 대해서 엄벌에 처할 겁니다 반드시.
Many angry family members shouted and screamed as Park spoke, demanding answers and venting their frustration over the lack of progress to save their loved ones. Some even attempted to rush the front of the informal debriefing. Others expressed doubt that the government was doing its best to handle the situation and complained of the lack of updates.
이분들에게 신뢰를 받을 수 있도록 앞으로 좀 하여튼 마지막 한 분까지 구조될 수 있도록 최선을 다하겠습니다.
President Park promised the families that they would be immediately informed about any developments, as well as the next steps in the rescue operation, including the arrival of 3 industrial cranes tomorrow, which will be used to try and hoist the ship. She told the families that while bad weather conditions are hampering the search, they should not lose hope. Paul Yi, Arirang News.
So how did the tragic day unfold? The 475 people on board the Sewol ferry should have been on their second day on Jeju Island right now.
They left from the port city of Incheon Tuesday night and were nearly 12 hours into their trip when something caused the ship to capsize. Our Shin Se-min walks us through the ferry's journey leading up to that fateful moment.
11 hours and 52 minutes. That is how long the capsized Korean ferry traveled after departing from its port with 475 passengers on board, more than 300 of them high school students. Ranging from little children holding their mother's hand to middle-aged travelers with backpacks, they all walked towards the ship, not knowing what was to come. The ferry leaves port an hour and 20 minutes after its scheduled departure time due to foggy weather skirting the coastal area.
We were told the thick fog would delay our departure time.
There are no indications of any trouble after the ferry hit open waters. And around 10 p.m. Tuesday, the ship passed by Palmido Island, slipping through the Incheon coastal waters, heading south toward Jeju Island. By dawn, the Sewol ferry passes near waters off Mokpo near Jeollanam-do province. 8:30 in the morning. Excited students wake up to thoughts of their field trip to Jeju. Many either call or text family members about their whereabouts and to tell them they are safe. But 20 minutes later, with just 2 hours to go before the ship is set to arrive at port, the ship comes to an abrupt stop and begins to capsize. The students and others on board would be in Jeju right now, if not for whatever caused the ship to sink. Yet, a majority of them remain missing at this hour, with a massive search and rescue operation underway to find them. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Heart-wrenching text messages sent by students stuck in the capsized ferry have been shared with the public. In one text, a student writes of despair in the face of certain doom.
And in others, students exchange words of love as they fear time might be running out. Our Connie Lee has the details.
At the time the ferry was sinking, students trapped inside the vessel sent text messages, and most of them reveal fears that they might not make it out alive. Students telling each other, "I love you," are seen throughout the exchange in one chat room. One student even writes, "I think we're going to die," showing feelings of hopelessness as a ship was tilting. In another chat room of students, one passenger writes, "If I ever hurt you, please forgive me," and then ends with, "I love you." It has yet to be confirmed whether the students who sent these messages have survived. Now an exchange between students and a teacher. The students ask if the teacher is okay and if he or she is wearing a life vest. The teacher responds with exclamation points, "Yes," and tries to reassure the students, telling them to stay where they were and to put on a life vest if they can. The conversation ends with words that possibly show a loss of hope among those on the ship. They all tell each other, "I love you," which may prove to be the last messages they'll ever send. A video taken by a cell phone also reveals students staying put inside the ferry when it started to capsize. And stories from survivors show desperate attempts to live, with some passengers breaking through windows and jumping into the ocean to be rescued.
I just jumped into the water and started swimming. It was really cold, so I tried to swim as fast as I could. When the ship was completely listed, the water just rushed in. The water really came up to my face, not giving me any time to think.
But he was one of the lucky ones who actually came out of this disaster alive. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
Well, today, rescue operations at Jindo were complicated by bad weather conditions.
And for details, we connect live to our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center. Bo-kyung, how's the weather at Jindo?
Guys, nature is not cooperating with us, but we really hope that the weather conditions on Jindo will clear up soon. But as for now, it's 13.7 degrees on Jindo, but sea temperature is at 11.2 degrees. Another 20 millimeters of precipitation will fall overnight, and showers are being accompanied by strong winds blowing at around 8 to 12 meters per second. And it looks like the rain on Jindo will continue through tomorrow morning with daytime highs reaching 16 degrees. Taking a look at the current conditions, the nation will gradually be at the edge of a high pressure front, which is why we are seeing heavy clouds across the map. As for other parts of the country, most regions are seeing light showers at this hour, but things will clear up by tomorrow afternoon. On Friday, Seoul peaks at 23 degrees, while Daegu and Gwangju make it to the low 20s. Moving on to other regions, Jeju makes it to 17 degrees, while Dokdo and Mount Kumgang hits 13 and 9. Back to you guys.
All right, thank you, Bo-kyung. And those are the stories we're following at this hour. I'm Choi Yusan in Seoul.
And I'm Sean Lim. Join us again for the latest on the ongoing sunken ferry rescue operation on our next newscast at midnight Korea time.